Buiten zoemt het stadsverkeer van Londen. Een ernstige buurt, vol verleden. Soms trillen zijn handen, soms niet aldoor. In de hal hangt hij zoals iedereen hem kent, die ook maar een beetje houdt van muziek, van schoonheid, van dat onnavolgbare vibrato van zijn vioolspel. Niet te veel, niet te weinig, maar precies zoals God het in gedachten moet hebben gehad. Of Beethoven, of Bartók. Een gezicht dat doorloopt in een viool, of andersom. Toen hij 12 was en Mozart speelde, kwam Einstein na afloop in zijn kleedkamer, zeggende: nu weet ik dat er een God in de hemel is. God is 81 jaar oud als ik hem ontmoet. Zijn moeder haalde ruim de 100.
The instant really is the continuity. There's no such thing as an instant divorced from past and future. The instant is simply the present continuity of our life. It's not as if it were an instantaneous photograph of something that didn't exist before or after. An instant is the actual now, and as it moves with us through time.
Hij is kleiner dan ik dacht. Bijna fragiel. Hij loopt als een vlinder. 2 gehoorapparaten in, waaraan hij nu en dan draait. Vreemd. De belichaming van de muziek is hardhorend. Soms geeft hij antwoord op een vraag die ik niet stelde. Als ik het over ontroering heb, zal hij over Israël beginnen. Omdat hij niet goed hoorde wat ik vroeg, omdat hij privé-emoties liever uit de weg gaat. Het is een donderdagmorgen in november. Ach, die onmogelijke vragen ook. Welke compositie, welke componist symboliseert het huwelijk tussen schoonheid en troost?
It's very, very difficult. It might even be Schubert.
Rückertlieder?
What?
Rückertlieder?
Yes. I think Schubert. It's difficult to say. It could be something that makes you cry more than you would otherwise, like the quintet of Schubert with 2 cellos, as the woman, which is intolerable at a funeral. It's absolutely impossible because you just break down. Or it could be something that takes you out of the sadness with serenity. Like some wonderful, serene Beethoven slow movement. I don't really know exactly. I don't know. Can't tell you. I know that in a rather trivial way, perhaps, I would always end my concerts for the soldiers with the Ave Maria of Schubert, because that was satisfied their need, their nostalgia, homesickness, and it was an easy way to end, you see, because I say, and now to end the program I will play. And then everyone was satisfied.
Wat is het meesterwerk van schoonheid en troost? Zo plat is die vraag. Grote stappen, snel thuis. Tenminste in Londen, waar we elkaar voor de eerste maal treffen. Maar als we elkaar een tijd later opnieuw ontmoeten, in een heel ander oord, ligt het antwoord plots voor het grijpen.
The truth of the ninth is like typically Beethoven. He almost speaks in quotations. I mean by that it's partly the great truth of life, which is that we all depend on each other, and the harmonies are necessary, and the dissonances are necessary, and it's all necessary. It's also the truth of an axiom, whether it is a literary axiom or a scientific mathematical axiom. Because an equation, a perfect equation, like Einstein's famous equation of matter and energy, reduces to the most economical, actually smallest dimension, a great truth. And the truth is always two elements that equal each other. And in Einstein's case, the most disparate elements that we'd never imagine have a common denominator. They equal each other in a certain proportion, multiplied by the speed of light. All right.
Beethoven?
And Beethoven's?
The ninth?
You can't say a greater truth than two descending fourths. At the beginning of the it's so simple. You can't reduce it anymore.
It's the total sublimation.
He composed in a different way from others. He didn't embellish. He reduced. It's like Leonardo da Vinci drawing skeletons before he drew a body. He took away the flesh and wanted to know what the skeleton was like before he put the flesh on. And it's just fourths and fifths. It's but behind it, there's the whole energy of the atom. There's a whole nuclear energy which explodes within 12 bars. It explodes into that. Well, you know. Such will, such determination, such assurance of speaking the truth, of knowing the truth. Because many people think they know, but they don't. Beethoven knew, and he knew he knew. You know, there's a Chinese proverb, which is a lovely one. Men are four. He who knows not, and knows he knows not, he is a child, teach him. He who knows not, and knows not he knows not, he's a fool, shun him. He who knows, and knows not he knows, he is asleep, wake him. He who knows, and knows he knows, he's wise, follow him.
Duizenden interviews heeft hij gegeven. Je verwacht vastgeroeste verhalen. Weinig sporen meer van verbazing of zelfs maar interesse. Ook al was hij in de briefwisseling vooraf nog zo enthousiast. Hij wil wel een beschouwing houden over schoonheid en troost. Hij heeft een A4'tje volgekrabbeld met aantekeningen. Maar liever is het hem als we wat praten. Vraag maar. Vraag maar. Maar waar begin je in godsnaam? Na een leven dat aan alle kanten uit zijn voegen barst. Begin je met een enkel citaat uit zijn autobiografie. Dat lijkt aan te sluiten bij het thema. In your book, there's one sentence. I was never happier. Do you remember when it was that you were never happier?
There have been a few such. No, I can't remember the specific. It must have been a personal thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it had to do with the public.
No.
Must have been. Was it when a child was born, or was it a reconciliation, or
no,
or some word that was said?
No.
or some nature.
You were in Venice under a summer night sky.
Yes.
After a concert.
Yes, I remember that.
Paganini, B minor.
A disastrous concert. A disastrous concert. I was totally unprepared. First of all, I thought the concert was going to be at night. And I went to sleep and would have a chance to work and look at the music and refresh, because I hadn't played that concerto in time, for a long time. Instead, as soon as I got into bed, they said, well, why aren't you here? The concert is starting in a few minutes. And it was really a very bad concert. I was somewhat ashamed, because dear Raphael Kubelik came to the concert, and he was sitting with Dan in the audience. And when I came to the cadenza at the end of the first movement of the Paganini B minor, which I remembered perfectly well, I suddenly went totally blank. I couldn't remember the cadenza, so I improvised something or other. It was very, very short. And then I played the final trill and went on, you see, and went on. But, and anyway, I hated the hall. It was an underground hall.
Teatro Nuovo.
Nuovo. Right. Horrible. And as it was an afternoon concert,
in your book, I managed to hold back the tears. I am accustomed to expressing what disturbs me only through music.
Yes. I visited Belsen and saw the place I'd known before, and saw it had become sort of a place of remembrance. I must confess to having not so much patience with remembrances, places of remembrances that are exploited by religions, as in the holy places of Jerusalem, where the different faiths fight over each little cubic centimeter of holy ground and charge accordingly. And for me, that's a demeaning of religion. And when I saw even Jewish memorial and Catholic and so on, I feel it as a human crime, as a human wound. And I'd like to include all the crimes that are happening under the names of every kind of religion in the world, in, as I say, in Vietnam, in Africa, and to see this kind of cornered by a particular religion that wants to claim its martyrs. I find, I don't know, that may be a very personal, subjective reaction I have, but I don't like to see flags flying over territory, even religious flags. I'd love to see this memory put into preventive measures for the future, into education, to enlightening people about what the human nature is capable of. Not a flag waving of we suffered, but a flag waving, how can we, but not a flag waving, how can we prevent such abominations from happening? To what extent are we ourselves responsible for them? Because every person is to a certain extent guilty. Everybody, even if it's only infinitesimal. And I think until we recognize that we are all capable, under certain circumstances, of behaving terribly, and put on guard against ourselves and what can save us and prevent that happening, until we do that, all the rest, look how we suffered. And the Jews who've survived, I mean, 2 generations ago, they are still claiming material rewards for people who have long since disappeared and who cannot receive the reward. instead of giving it, if there is anything to give it towards preventive efforts in education and in every other field of art and sport and craft and social work. But to claim that as your own right and to put a price on the heads of those who were killed and say that price belongs to me, I can't accept that as anything I could agree to.
You are Jewish. What have the Jews lost since the foundation of the State of Israel?
They've lost their innocence. Until they became a state, they really did observe the Ten Commandments. They did not kill. They were honest. They had good family life. And since they became a state, they have had to become what states become. That is the right to kill. That the first characteristic attribute of a self-respecting state is the right to kill, and the only right to kill. Nobody else has the right to kill except the state. And even though we have gone far beyond it in England and in Holland and in enlightened states, unfortunately the Jewish state, Israel, had to apply rather brutal measures to establish itself. And I think the Jewish mission is to prove to the world that there can be reconciliation between former enemies, that Jerusalem can become a city of peace instead of being a city of sacrifice. From Jesus' sacrifice and the Jewish sacrifices, from the Roman days, from the Babylonian days, it has always been a city where thousands and thousands of people have been crucified, murdered in the name of religion. It's continuing. And unless both sides can speak like that and say, let us embrace and let us share and let us change the world, if they could do that, it would be an example for the whole world. And I think if Israel has a mission, this is the mission.
Still to be accomplished.
Still to be accomplished.
It's very good. It's very good. But don't wait for no da 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 da. Come early and take your time. Take your time on all the notes, but come early. You see, let's just do the foreman. 136.
We need security, but we need change.
We need beauty and we need cruelty to compare it.
Yes, also. Evil is to a certain extent the other side. But then you mustn't go too far with that, because there's a lot of evil that we could avoid if we tried. We can't take it just passively and say, well, it's got to be. It doesn't have to be. There's so many idiotic things, stupid things, ignorant and cruel things that are not necessary in our education and in our society. But nonetheless, there will always be enough cruelty, enough pain. Yeah. There will always be. We'll never do it. And it should be that way. We are human beings. We are liable to every kind of disappointment, to accident, to dependent on the whims of destiny. And I have this organization called Live Music Now, and in England we give about 2,000 concerts a year, in France and Germany and so on. And we go to prisons and hospitals and terminal homes and factories and mines and so on and so forth. And once I was going with a group of French musicians to one of those hideous prisons, not far from Paris, which seemed to have walls within walls, and grim, horrid, not a blade of grass, not a plant, nothing growing there at all, except human beings incarcerated. And we came and we played music, quartets and beautiful music, which always has its maximum effect, as I'd learned during the war, for people who are in a sad condition, nostalgia, or very far away from home, or ill, or as in the Aleutian Islands in those days. And we played, and there was a great response. And then when I was walking away, between, I think there were 3 walls. There was a center part, you went through a courtyard, another wall, and another wall. And as I came to the last wall, one of the prisoners came and brought me a rose. Now, I can't quite describe what a rose meant in those
circumstances.
Under those circumstances, because it was as far away as a vision of paradise would be here in a prison camp. Or so. It's something which was so completely out of context. If he had brought a rag which would be painted, that would be an offering of its own. But a rose between those grim walls was something I couldn't believe. But it meant so much. Where it came from, I don't know.
Fast. Not too fast. Not too fast. Hold it back. It's un poco maestoso and moderato. Pam, hobo, that'll be all right.
I never had that kind of blissful life of the amateur, whom I respect, who loves amare, who loves his hobby, in this case music, who would take up music and let's play quartet this evening, or let's do that. My life was geared to the concert platform, and there were moments when I played quartet and so on, but it was more the regular routine, and it's a habit which I've had traveling and giving concerts since I was 13, 14. I've traveled the world, and that life is sort of ingrained in me, and in reality it's much more ordered than a day at home, because a day at home here I have to catch up and do 1,000 different things, a lot of correspondence, meeting people, catching up on obligations and my school and extraneous appointments and television and I don't know what. Whereas the concert routine is travel in the morning, settle in, a good sleep in the afternoon, and then the concert in the evening, and sleep and telephone calls, and telephone my wife and telephone generally some. So that life has a kind of patterned order about it which is very simple. I look at the scores in the flight or in the car and sleep.
I know you come in before the slow movement normally.
Yes. It's a long time to sit.
What?
It's very hard to sit through the whole thing without
I know
singing.
it is.
It's cold.
But if we gave you an armchair there,
No, it's because you can't sing the whole time.
No, exactly.
The voice gets cold.
But you see, you wouldn't disturb if you came up there.
Well, we don't want to be disturbed.
I don't know. Let's try it there and see. And if you don't like it, we'll go from it.
Well, I'm afraid you won't like it.
Well, no, I just want to try it.
Yeah.
I want to see what it's like. If it doesn't work, we go from it. Depends, of course, a great deal on what dresses you wear.
Yes, of course. Well, you're not going to see me way back there. I'll tell you that right now.
We need to finish.
Yes.
We need to finish at 6:15. So you have an hour.
Bartók was a unique experience. It was an example of where the power and the beauty of music establish a unity of understanding between the interpreter and the composer. I wanted to meet him, and I had, out of this pile of contemporary music, I'd chosen two works. The big sonata for violin and piano of Bartók and the great violin concerto. When I arrived on a November day in 43, I suppose, maybe even 42, I can't remember, Bartók had already arrived. I was on time. He had already arrived. He had drawn up an armchair facing the piano and the window at the far end of the room. He had the music on his lap, and he had a pencil in his hand. The real Hungarian Herr Professor, waiting to pounce on anything wrong. And he was already suffering from leukemia, so he was almost transparent. But the kind of transparency that a lightning has, electrically powerful. And he didn't say a word. There was nothing to do except unpack the violin and go to the piano, tune, and begin playing. He was seated there. At the end of the first movement, he got up from his chair, and in impeccable English, he said, "I didn't think that works could be played that beautifully until long after the composer was dead." Of course, those words to me were like manna from heaven, because it meant that I had understood him. Not only the music, but I had understood the man. Perhaps better than many people who would have only talked to him.
What did you understand in playing so wonderful?
I understood the man who controlled a tremendous, powerful violence with the serenity and the passion for goodness and understanding, very like Beethoven, very, very, and also the quartets follow the same evolution. A man who was very Hungarian, very idiomatic, composing music that was not literally Hungarian, but actually in spirit very much Hungarian, and where the accents fell, and where the determination, and where the cries, and where the shrieks, and where the compassion, and where the sadness and the crying at the end of the first movement. All this I felt, and I was also accustomed to observe minutely, as I always do, the indications of the composer, and then transform them into living reality. So it's not only this note at this time, but as it has to be shaped by the emotion and the thought. So anyway, when he said that, I felt I had really, it was one of the great moments of my life, because it was proof that I was capable of of understanding a human being, a composer. And fortunately, we played the second and third movement equally well. And then I was emboldened to ask him if he would compose something for me. I wanted to ask the minimum because he was suffering, and everyone said he needed money and so on. And I could have asked him, I'm sure, for a violin concerto, but I asked him for a sonata for violin alone, which was the minimum I could impose on him. And you know, he didn't cash the check until I had played the work and he had composed it and I could play it. Quite amazing. He was a great man, really great man. And he found it difficult in New York because, of course, the Americans are very warm-hearted and so on, but he wasn't the kind of man that would engage in trivial conversation. And it seemed to me he never said an unnecessary word. I mean, there was no how are you, where did you come from, where are you going, what are you doing, what beautiful weather, he never said any word that wasn't essential.
Yes, answering the question, do you know what time it is? Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. The norms of beauty resemble very much the norms of beauty in a woman, in nature. It has to have behind it a live temperament which is capable of extremes, otherwise it's shallow. It has to have the capacity for passion, for anger, for perhaps impatience, for at the same time great tenderness, and at the same time the warmth and the promise and the hope, and then the norms of beauty which are rather in terms of what we need and feel, they're rather rounded than jagged, you know, the isolation of the jagged. Although you can have cruel landscapes that have a certain beauty. The most devastating and depressing landscape I've ever seen was in the Greek island, where they had a huge volcanic eruption 2,000 years ago, and where half the island is covered with black lava. That black lava is still hot and has horrifying shapes, jagged and sharp, where you cannot walk on it. It's like hell. If you imagined hell, that would be hell, and heaven would be a wonderfully fertile land producing grazing and olives and fruit and so on. And we have today art that is perhaps a little too near the real. By that I mean that art must sublimate the violent in a way. It must communicate it. As I said, the beauty of a woman who has all these capacities and at the same time has the proportions. The art in relation to violence must sublimate the violence. But today, with our television and our means of reproducing in 3 dimensions reality in all its immediacy, does not serve the purpose of sublimation. You can depict, like Goya, the horrors of assassination, but there is still some redeeming message there. You don't actually see the blood run. There is that difference. The motion picture and the television in color and all have brought us closer to the unsublimated reality. And as such, it induces either the most violent reactions, or it induces a kind of armor, of what can I do? It happens every day, and we can't do anything about it. A kind of thick skin, which has to protect itself, because if it reacted all the time, it couldn't continue with its own life. So that I reproach that there isn't that kind of art that sublimates, because Beethoven can be very violent and use dissonances of half tones with power and intransigence, which really strikes you. But it still is sublimated, because it isn't the actual act of violence. And so beauty doesn't have to be all the time serene and so on, though we need that too. We need serenity, we need meditation. But if it sublimates our basic emotions, our drives, it can contribute to a civilized society. Beethoven's Ninth is a work that, like the great Passions of Bach or a great play of Shakespeare, they purge the emotions and the soul by taking you through the whole cycle of love and anger and pain and frustration, serenity, and finally joy. I think the audience after that work must be fully purged, and when they walk out on the street, they'll be good people for 5 minutes.
Wonderful choir, wonderful, bravo. Thank you very much, very much.
According to the promised heavens, it's an impossible place. I don't believe in heaven or hell. I believe that you make your own heaven and hell to a certain extent on earth, and other people contribute to it. My heaven, the good things that I enjoy, are largely dependent on all other people and what they bring to my life. That's why I'm very fortunate. I'm very modest about my good fortune, and I want to repay it in a way to try to ensure that it's going to continue. There's an element of reciprocity there between my life and all other lives. So that's the ongoing exchange and change that happens, and we are always looking for change. We need security, but we need change. What?
At your funeral.
At my funeral?
Is there some music to be played?
Well, I can't decide. I have suggested that it should be a happy occasion and rejoicing and no weight and nothing. But because I don't like the formal, black, and I don't like it. One lives one's life. It's been a very good life, wonderful life, and people should feel, well, that's fine, and let's move on. I don't want a trauer,
Not a kind of tragedy.
Tragedy. I wouldn't like that.
No, just an instant. I died, go on.
Yeah, that's it, yes.